So what I'm seeing is a lot of these large manufacturers consume with these things. And then when you go try to have a conversation about agentic or front office transformation, you get our budget's directed towards these big programs.
But it's interesting because, I agree. But what we're seeing is that those conversations need to happen.
Yeah, completely agree with you.
So the companies that we're speaking to are saying they want to think that way, but they are being restricted by those back office elements that need to happen. So how do we help those companies do it? That's probably the biggest thing. And you've got to have those conversations with them about the agentic piece, knowing that that's probably 2-3 years down the line. So I think in the UK, we are seeing exactly the same thing because they're being impacted by the US. So I think it is a really relevant topic to say that they have to solve that back end. So, yeah.
And to your point, I think one of the ways to get them there is to show up with real, tangible, maybe you don't have pre-built, but you've got real, tangible use cases that they can apply. You can come in with some sort of generic ROI calculator, and they can apply their own metrics to it. But what we were talking about, efficiency of service folks, efficiency of salespeople, offloading white space analysis, making human beings more, keeping the person in the middle, but making human beings more efficient. Forget about even going to full autonomous right now. Just offload work, right? I mean,
But we were having this conversation yesterday. We were with an organization yesterday talking about AI. And the first step for them is not about agentic. It's actually just about efficiency. It's just about automating their processes. And I do think that is probably the biggest thing from how do you separate the two, but then connect them together? Because everybody talks about it. The CEO agenda, the CIO agenda is about agentic.
So what's the difference, do you think? So robotic process automation had a similar hype at that moment in time. It was all about automation. It was all about the technology, and it didn't quite capture the market as much as perhaps the agentic AI conversation. What do you think the difference there is in where we are 2-3 years on from that?
I mean, I'll let Guy or Bill answer in a minute, but for me, it's because robotic process automation was very much focused at that middle to bottom level.
Yeah.
Agentic is seen about how do we actually make a difference? How do we move forward? And also, it's been consumerized. It's everywhere. It's not just in the working world. It's taking over the world. It's on every CEO's agenda. So everybody has to do it.
Yeah.
It's not a case of will you, it's when will you. But it's where does it fit in that journey? So that, for me, is the difference from a high level. I mean, Guy, do you have a...
Yeah, I think there's a few things in there. So I think I spent a long time in the industry in sort of the earlier parts of my career. What I've seen in the manufacturing space is those customer organisations tend to have hugely bespoke to their previous ECC, R3 implementations. I mean, I know one organisation that allegedly has 1 million lines of code to deal with PLM type activities. Those are not easy to unpick, and the migration to a clean core is going to be an exceptionally difficult journey for those organisations, and it will be a mistake for those organisations, I think, on two fronts to say we've got a program and we're upgrading to HANA. Because the truth is, as they do that migration, and they're looking, well, actually, this is a business process migration as well. That's going to sit across our landscape and into our supplier landscapes. They're going to have to make large swathes of change across the interfacing systems, the integrated systems. So that's point one. Point two, I think, is those programs are going to take a long time, years and years and years. There isn't a manufacturing business out there that is going to say, we're not delivering change in any of our business functions. They're all going to have to do something to keep up and survive, quite frankly, in the global market at the moment. And I think, when we look at geopolitics and what's happening in different countries, the Chinese, they move fairly quickly.
I totally agree. I just want to go back to something that Andrew said about the robotic realm. Put agents off to the side. I mean, I follow Mark Benioff. We've seen his posts of what's coming with Elon's robots and with what China is doing and the agility to which we're about to hit another revolution there. That's artificial intelligence. That's digital labor. We're going to hit that too. So to your point, better be staying current on how do you improve efficiency, improve top line, improve the performance of your own people. Because that's the next wave that's coming. I mean, those things move more agile like than most humans do, right?
So I've got maybe some examples on that. So actually, to address the initial question, which was, what's the difference between RPA and agentic? I think RPA was basically codifying some human actions and getting a computer to do it across systems effectively, and potentially swivel chairing between multiple applications and shifting data from one to the other. It wasn't intelligent, it was just automated. Agentic API is different. Agents analyze, think, and then take action. They do something. And that's a huge difference. So that was sort of one point I wanted to make. But robotics is really interesting. So when we talk about manufacturers, they've been using robotics for a long, long time. I was at a production line a year or so ago in Germany, and they'd put 40 autonomous guided vehicles into their facilities, which were not modern facilities in terms of the buildings housing them, but ultra modern sort of inside. And I remember walking around and I asked one of the production staff, are you deploying these to reduce your headcount? And he said, no, it's the opposite. We can't hire forklift drivers fast enough to come into our business. We can't find the people to come and do this work. That's why we're deploying these AGVs. And I think that's quite key in manufacturing as well. We talk about the workforce problem. I don't think this is about replacing people, because if you can't hire the people to do the jobs, you're not replacing anybody. You're just getting work done.
I think circling back to your point, Guy, the point around get moving, get looking, dip your toe in here, get some use cases going. I think, or you'll find yourself outdated, behind, inability to catch up. It's been my experience that the manufacturing industry has been slow to adopt some of these types things, and I think you're right that they need to. But
I think on that, I think they've been slow to adopt, but I don't feel, from what we're seeing with our customer base and conversations we're having, they're not slow to have the conversations. They want to have the conversations. They are looking at not just agentic, but technology as a whole, and how does technology enable them as they go forward?
I think that's an important point, and one that was coming to mind is if you look at other industries, the full adoption of digital transformation, looking at the business from an end-to-end perspective. But they started out with tactical fixes. If you take the banking sector, it was build an app instead of the bank. But then they started to look at full customer journeys, full operating models, and what technology enables that at an enterprise level to really gain the impact and value. Is it fair to say in manufacturing, it's still been an incremental, tactical, 1.1 solution type approach, but we're now moving into that. Let's look at it as an entire exercise.
It is, and that comes back to, I think, to some of Bill's points at the beginning around, what are the challenges? What's at the core of what they do? Manufacturers are making things. That's where they've got to resolve their, how they're more efficient. But it's now, how do they unpick some of the great systems they had to make it more relevant to those middle and front office systems and start to look at it. So it's not through fear of doing it, they're looking at it, it's just the how. And every manufacturer that we speak to, or any organisation actually in that industrial sector, is having the same problem. They don't really know where to start, so they're just not starting anywhere. I think the successful ones, and the points you're making, there are companies out there doing it, those are the ones that have just tried it. And they've not been afraid to mess up. It's an industry that wants to get it right before they really try something, and I think that's what we're seeing.
And that's a cultural and mindset thing.
Massively
if you look at a lot of those financial services businesses, the look and feel and the types of people in those organisations are different. They're actually technology-led in financial services, as they weren't 10 years ago. And actually, if you look at the culture and the mindset and the who they're bringing in, that's what it takes to change that kind of legacy culture.
But I mean, a lot of manufacturers, Guy, I'm sure you see it as well, embracing things like digital thread, digital twin, IoT. I wouldn't say that they're behind in technology and those kinds of things, because if they're not doing that, they're not able to predict maintenance and all the things that need to be done, right? So
I want to come back to you on that in a second, if I may. So I think the thing around adoption is a really key point, particularly for UK manufacturers. So in 2018, not to give a history lesson, the World Economic Forum and McKinsey started a global lighthouse network in manufacturing with 6 manufacturing sites worldwide, which were seen as the leaders for the adoption of digital technology. And people-centric change. I do want to sort of make that point in here as well. It's not about adoption of tech, it's people-centric change, technology-enabled change. Today there are 200 factories in that global lighthouse network reporting just astounding results, like products to market 50% faster than previous, 70% reduction in defect rates, these types of results, which are absolutely phenomenal. Of those 200 factories, 2 are in the UK, just 2 of them. And when I look at that and go, look at all this overwhelming evidence from around the world around the benefits of adoption of digital technologies, leading on to AI, why are we so slow in the UK? It is a cultural piece. There's a lot going on in the UK at the moment. You know, we've had not just in manufacturing, but some fairly well publicised cyber incidents at the moment that have been, you know, almost existential for those organisations who've had them. Certainly cost them hundreds of millions of pounds. We've got trade headwinds, geopolitical issues, access to capital. You know, whilst digital technology is transformational, it's also a barrier in some ways, you know, in terms of how you get past the pilot purgatory into a scaled up system across the business.
Great points, by the way.
Yeah, they're great.
Thank you.
Biggest driver for digital transformation is either opportunities or threats. You know, what would you all see as those opportunities or threats within the manufacturing industry specifically?
So for me, if I look at this, if I think about, just take the automotive industry, for example.
Yeah.
I think I saw an article this morning that BYD now has 100 dealers in its network just in the UK. And they've done that in less than 5 years. And it's phenomenal progress, and they're going to sell. They move so much faster than we have. And particularly with electric vehicles, they've done that because the architecture on the vehicle is fundamentally different. They can bring a car to market significantly faster. They're vertically integrated in terms of how they build that. And then we look at the UK and maybe the American manufacturers as well, the European manufacturers, and they're still stuck in 7-year product life cycles. It's like, right, you know, it's every 7 years we're going to release a vehicle. Maybe it's 10. We'll have a bit of a facelift after 3. That people will still buy that. You know, that's gone.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to lose if we don't think and change fairly radically. And your point on the digital thread. So I'm writing a paper at the moment within Salesforce, and this is my fundamental point actually, which is whilst manufacturers have made progress towards the digital thread and closed loop manufacturing, allowing the circular economy, nobody's nailed it. They're not completely there. And the reason they can't is because actually it takes a lot of thinking and work to close the loop, to have the perfect digital thread through your organization. And so much data is created on a shop floor from a vehicle that people alone can't process and understand that. So for me, that's where agentic AI comes in, not to replace workers, but to augment them, to help them think through problems, analyze it, take action. And if in the digital thread, if the digital thread can be enabled by agents taking relatively low-level action, you know, whatever that is, you know, we've noticed that there's a trend in the failure of a particular part on a vehicle or a product or whatever it is in the field. That's going to be picked up and recognised by agentic AI. That's going to get together the relevant engineering team, the relevant manufacturing team, the team from the supply chain partner who provided the product or the sub-assembly, whatever it is. You can bring that together through agentic AI in hours rather than weeks or months. The problem's solved much faster. Sorry.
No, that's fine. But I think on that, so I agree, but also at the same time, I think it's bigger than that. I think the opportunity is not just the agentic AI, and I think we've got to move broader than that.
Yeah.
I think it's really more around the collaboration, the digital collaboration across the ecosystems for these organizations from within their own business, across their supply chain, but also through the technology vendors. I mean, the proliferation of, you know, what we're doing with tech, how fast it's moving. Not one tech vendor can do everything. Agentic is not, you know, just Salesforce. It's every part of agentic, but it's also the IoT. It's how do we, as two companies in the technology space, help these manufacturers realize there's a journey to connect everything together. So yes, I agree with everything you said, but let's just broaden it and let's help our customers broaden that scope of how do we bring it all together. It's not easy, but the thing is that's quite a common challenge that we're seeing. I think everything we talked about here has been that common challenge of how do we do that. So yeah, that would just be my thoughts on that.
I think Guy's point is, I agree completely too, that I think manufacturers figured out how to capture the data before they figured out what to do with the data. So your scenario of a car manufacturer and all the vehicles, I mean, think about, jet engine manufacturer. You fly a 5-hour flight, a gigabyte of data per engine, twin engine plane, 10 gigabytes of data for one flight.
It's like petabytes.
And then to your point, we got to get into how do we coexist? Because Salesforce could be handling the customer interaction, that part of the agent, but we can invoke GCP or AWS to go through all of the data that has been accumulated and is already living in the hyperscaler world, right? To solve these. That's where I think it goes back to actually showing up with some use cases and maybe even some lightweight IP accelerators. Hey, we think the business case is this, but let's talk about your situation. But here's some proposed solutions. And you can start with easy things. Initiate my RMA through Agentforce. I want to set up an installation for a manufacturer of some sort of goods. Then you can get into some of these more complicated, interrogate asset data from an IoT scenario, right? Look at prediction maintenance patterns, those kinds of things.
Yeah, it really is. It's taking some of that fantastic silo data that no one's really done a great deal with, and just trying stuff with it, connecting up the data, seeing what comes from it, and then not having to fully bake that whole strategy across the chain and just get started is probably something that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think there's a few things in there. So I think we take away the sort of excitement and the hype around agentic AI. It's another technology. And the thing I've learned over the however many years it's been in technology is it's around governance, it's around enabling the transformation, encouraging innovation in your organization, but fundamentally understanding what's going on, what it's going to do, and where the benefit's going to come from. And I don't think agentic AI is going to be any different from that. We're already seeing customers live with Agentforce, the Salesforce solution. And whilst the overall capability of the solution is huge and very powerful and very deep, they're fairly simple tasks that have gone live now. So we've seen service management, for example. So manufacturers go from accurate customer responses in hours to minutes. Availability of information across the board in manufacturing, service teams and out to customers. It improves customer satisfaction, which is a board level item, even if it's not the primary one. But I think when manufacturers get confidence that actually we've seen this agentic AI deliver value, we see the value from it, we can do more with the same, we can redeploy resources, we become more intelligent as an organization, that's when the capability will spread. What I think is interesting around this agentic piece is, in the same way that every manufacturing organization has multiple technology vendors in their IT landscape, I think ultimately we're going to see multiple agentic AI solutions in each landscape, which is fine. They're going to talk to each of the three. I'm not the expert, but MCP, whatever it is. But critical for me, I think, is, well, what is the collaboration layer within a manufacturing organization at the moment? Because let's face it, it's email or it's paper, or Bob is running to Claire on the other end of the production line and saying, we've got a production line issue, go and get Claire, or wherever it is. I'm being sort of jovial for effect, really. Actually, if we're going to enable agentic across the enterprise, even if you've got multiple agentic AI platforms, you need a common collaboration platform that allows the agents to spin up, allows the agents to engage the people on that collaboration platform so they can solve problems and innovate.
And I think this is something really important that I know I've mentioned before, which is confidence. It's the adoption. I liken it to the adoption of cloud. 10, 15, everyone was really nervous. Nobody wanted to do it. Now, you don't think about anything but you don't have data centers typically. And I think to your point about coming with use cases, showing where it's working in other markets, showing where the impact has already been seen in a secure fashion, will have that snowball effect like cloud did, 10, 15 years ago. But leading with what those companies believe to be the impactful kind of use case, and us coming with, and here's how it's working in other places, starts to have that snowball effect within the market.
You made a really interesting, one word there, which was secure. And I think that's part of the problem.
Yep.
It's again, going right the way back to what are we seeing? Some organizations are still not sure. Do they trust it? Is it secure? Going back to your point around the security piece. And that is a big, big challenge. And that's probably one that needs to be addressing is within these organizations, because they're so used to locking their data down.
Yep.
You mentioned about the airlines having this gigabyte data. It's so valuable. It's valuable data. That's their secret sauce, isn't it? They don't want the risk that they start putting that out. They stick that into an agent, that can take it anywhere. And it's that unknown factor because it is moving at a pace. And I think that for us is something that the conversations we're having, as I'm sure you're having, is settling the nerves across the industry to say, actually, it's not black magic. There are secure things there. It is fine.
Do you think that's a geographical thing? Do you think other markets are as sensitive? Or do you think UK is a conservative?
I would say that the UK market, what we're seeing is, are they less trusting? It feels that way.
Yeah.
But like I said at the right at the beginning, we're having conversations. They're having conversations. They're asking questions. They're just not taking that leap.
Yeah.
They're dipping their toe. They're not putting all their data in. We are seeing, globally, some organisations doing it, but nobody's got it right yet.
Yeah.
I think that's the
100%,
thing.
yeah.
So for me, the message is the manufacturing businesses just have to start doing it. They've got to stop being so, we need the whole solution done. That's where we need to get to.
I mean, Gartner's putting statistics out that say 6% of companies, not manufacturing companies, are doing things that are somewhat critical in production. Yeah. So you're right. Nobody's really doing it. But I also think the numbers of people piloting, looking at proof of concepts, those numbers need to come up in the manufacturing sector. And, the good news for you guys is you guys do handle. There are platforms that don't handle trust to the degree that you guys do, right? I mean, that's a big deal.
And I think that's a really interesting point, because when I think about adoption of AI across the board, manufacturing as well, this is the white-collar industrial revolution, in my opinion. But I think what's happened with the large language models come in. I mean, hands up who hasn't used ChatGPT or, we've all got our hands on. Of course we have. We probably use those types of tools every day in our jobs for a variety of things. But that's the problem in a way, because the C-suite has been using large language models, either paid through their organisation or their personal ones. So data's leaking out of the system in some way through that adoption of LLMs. And then if you're, whoever you are in the business, going to the C-suite and saying, hey, we want to implement AI, without going and saying, but this is enterprise-grade AI with a trust layer, with guardrails around what the AI can do, what it's allowed access to, the data it's allowed access to, what it can think about, the actions that it can take. I think there's a big educational journey to go on with not just manufacturers but other organisations about that, because nobody's going to go into ChatGPT, no C-suite's going to go into ChatGPT and say, hey, go select a new supplier for that turbine blade, cancel my diary on Friday afternoon because I want to go and play golf and call me a car. That's not how agentic AI is going to work in the short term.
But it was the same as, when that move to cloud happened. You mentioned it earlier. People were scared.
Yeah.
People said, that's never going to take off. We would never put an ERP in the cloud. We'd never put that data in the cloud. Guess what? It's all in the cloud because it's more secure. It's easier to manage. So the agentic piece, there has to be that leap of faith around that trust. I mean, we've got the credibility in our business and we can talk to that, but the organizations that within the sector just have to start talking. They have to start opening up and saying, okay, to your point, 6% are trying it with critical stuff. I would suggest probably don't, if it's your first attempt, don't try it with the critical things, but just try something. Prove it. Let's prove it.
But I think you made an interesting point, and we've talked about it. We're talking about the C-suite. We're talking about the CEO mandate. I think for me, this is the first digital program or project that's ever been in the CEO's top-of-mind agenda, usually dealing with CIOs, CTOs, CDOs. This has become a mandate and investment, a kind of catalyst to change the whole organisation for the first time, which is great for the sponsorship of momentum. But it's then, how do you give that level of confidence to a CEO to say, change your business in this way?
So I maybe have a couple of examples there. So somebody I know in the manufacturing space, in the aerospace sector, who's leading the AI function in that organisation, was telling me about how they've started with a sort of trusted AI in their organisation, and he's been very clever about it, in my opinion, the way he's gone about it, because he's aimed it at the C-suite. Yeah. So the examples he was talking about were, he wants to find out somebody in the C-suite wants to find out what is the performance of a particular site that does whatever it does with regard to something that they manufacture. And the previous process was the guy in the C-suite asks for the data, and then a team of 3 data scientists goes off for a fortnight and comes back and says, well, it could be this or it could be this, depending on whose data you trust coming out of that facility. Right? And that's a problem. What he's done, and I'll come on to why this is potentially a challenge, is they're using an LLM solution, feeding in the most trusted data into a data room that LLM has access to. So you can go and query that data, but it's vast quantities of structured and unstructured data. And of course, it behaves like an LLM. So you ask it the one question, it comes back and tells you the answer, but it comes back and tells you a whole load of other insightful information around it as well. So now the C-suite's getting that information in 2 seconds rather than 2 weeks, which is hugely powerful. Yeah. The challenge for him scaling that is one of, it takes a team of data scientists to go and get all the relevant data to start with, to bring it into whatever the technology room is, to put the walls around the technology room, to build the LLM, etc. So he's saying it's a great success in terms of showing the power of AI to the C-suite within the organisation, but it doesn't scale at the moment because they can't just add more data from their unstructured data around the organisation. They've got to curate that data. So we need a solution.
The one other thing that I'll just add on the manufacturing and kind of a little bit of the friction, I think, and I agree, Chad, with conversations, we can have conversations. But I think when agentic first started to hit, people thought it had to be autonomous, it had to be customer facing. And I think now people are a lot more educated. There can still be a human in the middle. That human can look before it goes out. So if you don't totally trust what's coming back from the AI, you can have a human being look at it. Yeah. But you made that human being more efficient. And the idea of augmenting humans or freeing up, line level people to do other things or handle more things has also opened up, the willingness to kind of look at it. And I think that's an okay solution too, to start with. Yeah. Get confidence in it. Get confidence in what the model is telling you. Then maybe you can move some of the functionality out to fully autonomous. Keep some of it, where a human is still in the middle.
It's really interesting. We were having a conversation this week with an organization around agents and the digital labor, digital workforce, and explaining to them that there's a general belief that you will never have one agent that does everything. It's not about an agentic AI in your business. It's about treating an agentic AI as an agent or as an employee that has set guardrails. It does a job really well, and then it hands off to the next one. Because what you don't want is one agent doing this, then teaching itself to do that, and then do that, and do that, and do that, because it will never do anything. It will never finish. It will just keep going. And it's how do you manage those? So when we look at this agentic world, I think it's about augmenting it with humans. There will always be humans in the mix, always. And this comes back to the point around the CEO agenda. Why is it so different than an RPA? Right back to your question about an hour ago, is actually AI and agentic is across the business. Yeah. ERPs, if you were talking to an intern in the business, they wouldn't even know what an ERP was. Nowadays, they know what AI is. They know how important it is. I think it's across the business. So go right the way back to the initial conversations. We've got to help these organizations understand where it fits with humans, with agents, and how to manage it. And they just got to get started. I think is probably the main thing.
I think the point that you made, too, about doing some work and then passing off. We work as human beings in a team environment in most of the things we do. We should be thinking that way about how agents will work together to solve problems. Yeah. Be able, this is the work that this agent does. Yep. This one does this, and they work together to get to the end solution. I think that's really important.